Everyone knows that the hardest part of a habit is not starting it, but actually maintaining it over the long term. If you make a habit too complex or too boring, it's going to be harder to show up on a day-to-day basis. And then you're going to end up giving up before you reach the level of automaticity. Automaticity is when a behavior becomes automatic, something that you do automatically without thinking or without a huge mental load. Generally, the goal with most habits, most routines, is to get it to the level of automaticity. For example, brushing your teeth. That's an automatic thing that you're doing every day. Yeah, that's an automatic thing that you're doing every day without thinking about it too hard. So today I'm going to show you 3 ways to build momentum in the early stages of a habit so that you can follow through consistently. By the way, this is very closely tied to the A in my ARCS framework for supportive discipline. If you're interested in learning more about the ARCS framework, you can go to the link in my description, or you can go to the URL brainfriendlyblueprint.com. So the first way you can build momentum in habits is by removing barriers. So when you're about to go do the task or the behavior that you want to develop into a habit and you feel resistance, I want you to take a moment, pause, and ask yourself, what specifically are you looking to avoid? What specifically are you resisting? Because often there's one piece of it that you are either inventing or assuming has to be true in order for you to do the behavior. So let's use the example of exercise. My mom exercises pretty consistently, but previously it was really hard for her to get herself to exercise. One of the things that came up as we were talking is she believed that in order to have effective exercise, she would have to exercise for at least an hour. Helping her reframe that rule, what I suggested for her was instead she can consider her exercise complete if she is sweaty. I said this because I know that there are 15-minute workout videos that would lead to sweating. Specifically, I use this because it's something tactile, something concrete that she can hold on to. It doesn't tie her to a full hour of her time, which I think was the main barrier for her. 1B of this, right? So with removing barriers, another thing to think about is simplifying the action. Very often we are adding complexity where there doesn't have to be some. So an example for me is specifically the mornings can be really hard where I might be hungry, but I start thinking about, well, I want my first meal to be like really high nutrient. I want it to be fibrous and filling and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, well, if I'm doing that, then I need to cut onions about this. And I'm like, dang, am I gonna take out the cutting board? I'm gonna have all these dishes to do. And it just keeps building and building in my head into essentially like this whole grand event when realistically all I need to do is just get some fiber in my body and it's okay. So the way that I simplify, the way that I think about breakfast is I have now like 2 very low effort options that I go to if I want to eat but don't want to go through the effort of cooking. The other thing, by the way, that I want to just note here is I also added in my head that I'd have to do all the dishes immediately, which is that's not real. I can do the dishes whenever I want to. So that's another thing that simplified the process for me. So I hope it's clear that what really matters with removing barriers is that you identify the piece of this behavior that you do not want to interact with, and you find a way to reframe it, or you find a solution where you get to evade it completely. That's what I mean by removing barriers. So the second methodology you can use to build momentum to get you to act on a habit immediately and consistently is to increase the activating energy. Okay, we're gonna do a quick science sidebar here. In chemistry, there is this concept called the catalyst. Sometimes it's a chemical compound, sometimes it's something like heat. A catalyst is an agent that you add to the chemical compound that you're interacting with, in order to make the chemical reaction happen faster. If you want to accelerate the speed of your experiment, you might add a catalyst because it's going to increase the activating energy and make everything happen faster. Taking this back to how can a catalyst help you build momentum for a habit, this is where we introduce gamification. Gamification is super helpful for neurodivergent folks, or specifically folks who have like a dopamine dysregulation. Gamification helps to create something to anticipate. And dopamine is the neurochemical of anticipation. What you're doing is you're producing an external version of anticipation for you to move yourself forward. Going back to the same exercise example, sometimes if I don't want to exercise, what I will do is I'll time myself. I'll be like, how quickly can I do 15 burpees? Let's just see. How quickly could I do that? And sometimes I'll get to the end of that. I'll get to that 15th burpee and I'll be like, cool, I still don't want to exercise. And I'm okay with that. This is a really big part of it. Sometimes you'll do your low stakes challenge and you still don't want to do the rest of, like, you don't want to do a whole version of your habit or your routine. And that's okay. Another video is coming where I'm going to talk about the minimum viable routine. The main point of that is sometimes in the beginning of a habit, you actually have to build the muscle of showing up for that habit. So more than trying to, let's say you were trying to learn a handstand in the first month or the first 2 months, rather than trying to specifically improve your handstand, I would say it's much more valuable to put your effort towards showing up for your handstand time every day. Another example that I actually really like is I have a friend who does not like to clean her apartment at all. She hates it, and she also doesn't have the resources to hire someone else to do it. So the way that she gets herself to clean her apartment is she invites someone over. So she might invite them over like for the end of the week, or if she's in a rush for some reason, she might invite them over like later that day, and it activates her. So she's like, oh gosh, I gotta clean my apartment because someone's gonna come see. And so thinking creatively like that in terms of getting an activating agent, like increasing your activating energy, can lead to a really playful method of developing a habit. And the final methodology is to dangle incentives in front of yourself. So reward yourself for doing the thing. I think that we are constantly underestimating how motivating rewards can be, how motivating treats can be. This is also a really useful reframe. So I think a lot of us, our relationship to discipline is punishment oriented or shame oriented. And because discipline is something that you can be in relationship with, you also get to set the terms of that relationship, right? So it can be punitive or it can be supportive. I'm willing to bet that you already do this bargain with yourself where it's like, if I don't do X, then I'm not allowed to have Y. We naturally, maybe not naturally do that, but we have all been conditioned in a system that thinks in that way of like punitive first. And it just doesn't have to be like that. You can be on board with yourself. You can support yourself and have a supportive relationship to showing up. So rather than withholding, how can you frame it so that this is a treat, this is a dessert, if you will, for eating your veggies? Okay, so we just learned 3 different ways to essentially bootstrap your way to consistency. And as a reminder, if you want to read more about these methods in depth, as well as my entire ARCS framework for discipline, you can go to brainfriendlyblueprint.com, or you can just click the link in my description. Awesome. Thank you for watching. See you next time.